And it's been really important to me to make sure that we are hearing matters increasingly as we increase the access to our courts, but also to make sure we're keeping folks safe. We've had a lot of courthouses closed because court staff have contracted COVID-19. And I know that these are difficult times, but I also appreciate the fact that for all of us, these opportunities, as these times as challenging as they are, really do provide opportunities for us to think about how to do things differently and better, but also think about how we can galvanize and come together to really move our communities forward. And it's usually because of challenges like this we find our communities moving forward. Moving forward, advancing, and it really does take us all coming together in order to do that. So I just am so grateful to be able to be here this evening, and I look forward to our
Thank you very much. And sorry for the interference. Some people haven't figured out the muting part. Okay. Thank you, Chief Justice. Our next candidate is Justice Mark Davis. We've become Facebook friends. I have communicated a lot with him over the last year trying to get this organized, and I appreciate your patience and persistence. Justice Davis is a lifelong resident of North Carolina. He was born in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Justice Davis received an undergraduate degree in political science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He obtained his law degree from the UNC School of Law and served on the North Carolina Law Review. Justice Davis spent 13 years as a litigation attorney at the Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice law firm. He then served as a special deputy attorney general in the North Carolina Department of Justice and for 2 years as general counsel to the governor. He served 6 years as a judge on the North Carolina Court of Appeals and has been an associate justice on the Supreme Court of North Carolina since March 2019. He is the first Jewish member in the history of the Supreme Court. In 2019, he authored a book on the North Carolina Supreme Court entitled A Warren Court of Our Own. Justice Davis, do you have a few words to say?
Susan, thank you so much. As you and the Chief both indicated, excuse me, this has been a long time in the making, and we're so delighted that it worked out. As much as we love being in the mountains, we wish that were possible, unfortunately, the world doesn't allow us to do that right now, but this is the next best thing, and it's wonderful to see all of you on screen, and hopefully we'll see you in person before too long. These elections coming up for our court are so important, and it's just an incredibly important cycle. We have everything from the president on, and there's so many important races that are going to take up people's attention, and appropriately so. But sort of our mantra as we go around the state is, please don't forget the judges. Please don't forget the judges, because the work we do on the Supreme Court, it's so important. Everything you see on the news, everything you read in the newspaper, everything you see online, every dispute eventually makes its way to the North Carolina Supreme Court. And it's very important to have people on this court who are committed to being fair and impartial and not being swayed by any sort of bias or partisan influence. And that's certainly something that Chief Justice Beasley, Judge Inman, and I have in common. We all take very seriously the oath we took when we first became judges to be fair and impartial and to not let anything get in the way of applying the law. And candidly, we have opponents who take a different view of what judges should do and what the Supreme Court should do. And half of our court is on the ballot, which is rare. So these elections, which are so crucial for the president, for the governor, for U.S. Senate, for the General Assembly, they're equally crucial, if not more crucial, for our Supreme Court. So by being here tonight, you're demonstrating that you care about our courts and you want to keep us fair and impartial. And we're very, very grateful to you for that. And we look forward to talking with you this evening about some of the issues that we deal with and you deal with.
Thank you. Moving on to Judge Lucy Inman. Judge Inman currently serves on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. and is a candidate for the open seat on the North Carolina Supreme Court. Judge Inman was elected statewide to the Court of Appeals in 2014. Judge Inman's first career was as a newspaper reporter. I thought that was really interesting. While covering court proceedings, she was inspired to participate in the justice system. She earned her law degree from UNC School of Law. Judge Inman went on to practice civil litigation for 18 years, first in Los Angeles and then back home in Raleigh. In 2010, Judge Inman was appointed to serve as a special Superior Court judge. She served in that role for 4 years, presiding in hearings and jury trials across North Carolina. Since her election to the Court of Appeals, Judge Inman has authored over 400 appellate decisions in a wide variety of cases. Judge Inman.
Susan, thank you so much. And I think this gathering is an example of persistence and getting things done. As Chief Justice Beasley and Justice Davis have said, I'm so sorry that we're not there in person. The last time I visited all 3 of your counties, I was on a wonderful trip with the late, great Jane Hips and Julia Buckner. And we met people gathered in parking lots, in restaurants, in homes. And I'm just trying to remember
I think she froze for a minute.
could not ask for any else to emulate than Beasley, much like a governor would manage a pandemic. And Justice Davis was on the Court of Appeals, where I now serve until last year, and I'm so looking forward to serving with them. The judicial races really are different from the legislative races, and the governor's race and the attorney general's race and the president's race, in that judges have a job to make sure that our democracy stays stable. We're a check on the other branches of government. And in these times when so much seems to be in upheaval, it's really important for folks to remember that even though the judiciary may seem the driest and the least sensational of these races, we're really fundamental to making sure that our legislature
I'm sorry, Judge Inman, you keep freezing up. Is that happening with everyone else? Okay,
I apologize if that's the case.
that's okay. It's not your fault. It's part of the infrastructure problem. I think we heard most of what you had to say. Were you finished?
I'm sure that I was. Thank you so much for your patience with this connection. Thank you.
That's okay. It happens on every Zoom call I've ever been in on. We're now going to move to the questioning part. If you have questions, make sure and put them in the chat box so that we can kind of make sure that the questions are of the type that the judges can answer. And if you put them in there, then I will go through them and try to pick out the ones that I think they can answer. And if they can't answer, they'll tell me that. Candidates, to make this easier, I'm going to ask each question to one of you specifically, but feel free to jump in on each other's questions. That's fine. The first one is for Justice Davis. How is running a judicial campaign different from running a normal campaign? Judge Inman just addressed that a little bit and said it is different, but how is it different?
Well, it's very different. And by the way, I think all of us are sort of wondering what a normal campaign looks like in this climate, because we're certainly living in very abnormal times. But even under the best of circumstances, judicial campaigns, as Lucy said a minute ago, are just different from campaigns for other branches of government. You know, when judges go on the campaign trail, we're not allowed. We're expressly forbidden under the judicial code we live under to express our personal views on policy issues. It doesn't mean we don't have personal views. We all have very strong personal beliefs, but as judges, we're not allowed to talk about that. And the rules are there for a reason. It's because you want your judges, and I mean you generally, everyone would want judges who are not predisposed to ruling a certain way on an issue. I think we all want judges who are committed to being fair and having an open mind. And so that's why the rules exist. And sometimes we go around the state, or when we were able to go around the state, and people would get frustrated occasionally because they were so used to hearing candidates for governor or the General Assembly or Congress, you know, give a specific answer to the question they ask about a particular public policy issue. And we just can't do that. We would get in trouble, and appropriately so, if we tried. All we can talk about is our background, our qualifications, why we're passionate about our job, and why we think we deserve to be elected or reelected, as the case may be. So that really is a major difference between running for judge and running for other races. And you know, the unfortunate byproduct is we're very anonymous. The overwhelming majority of voters who go to the polls really don't have personal knowledge about who they're voting for when they vote for judges. And that's why it's so important for us to try to get the word out so people know our names and people understand these are fair judges. These are the kind of judges we want to keep in office.
Thank you very much. Do you find that people ask questions and that you often have to say when you're campaigning, I can't answer that question because it would call for me to give an opinion about something?
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly do. And, you know, one of the things interesting, one of the many interesting things about campaigning as a judge is you sort of find out that people think judges, you know, really just have superpowers almost. Whenever I talk at a high school, someone will raise their hand and say, you know, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about drugs? What are you going to do about crime? And, you know, we have to say those are very important issues and very good questions, but we're not legislators, we're not governors. Judges are unique. We have to wait until an issue is brought to us before we do anything. We're not allowed constitutionally to reach out and grab an issue just because we find it interesting. And I feel like I'm doing all the talking. I hope my colleagues will chime in on that.
Would either one of Chief Justice or Judge Inman, would you care to weigh in on this?
I would certainly agree with everything that Justice Davis said. And in that same vein, I think it's important to be mindful that judges cannot make promises about the outcome of cases or how they might handle a situation. And we would encourage you that if there is a candidate who makes a promise to you about the outcome of cases, that you please are leery. You really don't want, I mean, it's impossible to be fair and impartial if you can forecast the outcome of a case. And so we don't do that.
I watch a lot of Perry Mason, so I kind of know the basics.
He was a good teacher.
This next question is for Chief Justice Beasley. How is COVID-19 affecting our courts right now? And what do you think will be the new normal afterward? Do you think this is going to affect how the court functions and operates daily in the future?
Well, it already has. Effective March the 16th, I entered an order which greatly reduced the activity in all of our courts across the state. As of June the 1st, we have begun to expand the access to our courts, but we are still not hearing cases in the same way and at the same level or to the same extent with all the cases as we were before the pandemic. And you know, that has consequences around the timeliness that people's cases are heard. people don't come to the courthouse when things are going well in their lives. And so I'm certainly always very concerned about the timeliness of the decisions that we're making in our courts. But we have had over 50 people who are working in our courts across the state who've contracted COVID-19.
Wow.
And when that happens, it means that we shut down the courts, and the people around the person who's contracted COVID-19 has to get tested, and then the courts are sanitized. We've had over 57 court facilities that have closed temporarily. So, I mean, the impact of this pandemic is great. In terms of where we're headed, it's hard to know. I mean, we've heard over these last several weeks that there would be peaks and then another peak, and now I understand we're still in the first peak. What we do know is that the numbers continue to rise, and I will continue to make sure that safety is paramount in our courts, while we still make sure that we can hear as many cases as we possibly can. I'm very thankful that we've heard a lot of cases across the state virtually, which has been a wonderful way to still be able to carry on with a lot of our work. And some of the hearings have also been telephonic. So it's hard to forecast where we will be in even a couple of months, because it's been hard to really determine the path of this disease. So I'm hopeful, as I'm sure all of you are, that we are going to come out of this sooner rather than later, because I'm certainly very mindful that there are so many people suffering as a result of this pandemic.
Thank you. You know,
Can I chime in for 1 second?
Sure.
I just want to echo what Judge Inman was saying earlier. It's just, not just as Democrats, but as North Carolinians, all of you should be so proud of what Chief Justice Beasley is doing. Her accomplishments during this pandemic have just been absolutely remarkable. The leadership she has shown, just exemplary. She's being faced with a situation that no other Chief Justice in our history has had to deal with. And she's done it with bold, decisive action that has really saved lives, and it's kept our courthouses operating as much as they could while still being mindful of safety. It's been such a difficult tightrope to walk, and she really has walked it perfectly. And it's such an honor to serve with her and to see the wonderful job she's doing leading our judiciary.
Thank you. I don't know if you're aware, but in Cherokee County, we have commission meetings that are held in the courthouse. And once Chief Justice Beasley announced that everybody going in there would need to wear masks, the commissioners decided that they would no longer hold meetings there, and that they would instead hold them at the senior center, so people would not have to wear masks. That's what we're up against. Just thought I'd throw that out there in case you hadn't heard it.
Wow.
This is for Judge Inman. There you are. What is the single greatest misconception people have regarding the role of the state judiciary?
If I start not to see people's heads moving, I'll know I've lost a connection and I'll cut off my video. You know, it's hard to pick just one, but I will say one common misconception is that people expect the appellate judiciary to be able to resolve a conflict, a legal conflict in our society, simply because a conflict may be seemingly tearing us all apart. But judges can't, unlike the legislature, judges can't put a legal issue on our docket to decide. We have to wait for a case to come before us. And every case starts in the trial courts or in an administrative agency. We don't initiate the cases. And the other thing that we don't choose is we don't choose the type of case that may come before us that presents a legal issue. Every case is governed by the law, and it's governed by the facts of that case. And our job is to apply the law fairly and impartially, think forward in terms of how that opinion is going to affect our law for generations to come, but also to work within the parameters of what the case is before us. So that's probably the biggest misconception.
A question that has popped up on our chat, Judge Inman, and maybe this would be a good question for you to answer, is can you explain how cases move through the court systems in North Carolina?
Yes. So most cases move through the court system through our trial courts. And I'll start with the magistrate courts. We know small claims, there are district courts, and there are superior courts. Whether it is a dispute about child custody, or it's someone who's charged with driving while impaired, or a violent crime, or a dispute between an employee and employer, or landlord and tenant, those cases start when someone files a complaint or when the state charges someone with a crime. And those cases are screened in a way. In the criminal side, there are all sorts of constitutional protections that apply. On the civil side, there are procedures to go through. Not every case that's initiated, whether it's by a criminal charge or a civil complaint, ends up in a trial. Many cases are resolved before trial. But if the parties cannot agree and a case goes to trial, depending on whether it is in superior court or district court, it will be decided either by a judge, like a district court judge often sits as judge and jury to find the facts and to rule on the legal consequences of those facts. In superior court, often there are jury trials, and I think somebody mentioned Perry Mason. I grew up watching Perry Mason, and that's my idea of what the courts are. Perry Mason spares you all the details of the legal arguments. And in 4 years as a superior court judge, I never had anybody confess on the witness stand, that they committed the crime. But after there is a decision in the trial court, if a party feels that he or she was not treated fairly, that the judge presiding over the case didn't apply the law correctly, or that evidence that should have been introduced to the jury was not introduced, or that evidence that shouldn't have been introduced was introduced, and they can file an appeal to the North Carolina Court of Appeals, where I now sit. We're a court of 15 judges, and from any civil case and any criminal case, there is a right to seek review in our appellate courts. At the appellate courts, in some cases, go straight to the Supreme Court, termination of parental rights cases and death penalty cases among them. At the appellate level, we don't hear evidence like they do in the trial courts. We don't hear testimony. We hear legal arguments from lawyers about whether or not the procedure below complied with the law. We are generally deferential to what a jury has decided or what a judge has decided as fact, because we're not there hearing the evidence. We have what's called standards of review. There are procedures that we must follow in evaluating cases. And I know many people's eyes are already glazing over because this just isn't nearly as exciting as, did a witness confess to something. But the reason that we follow these pretty strict and standard rules is so that every person in this state, no matter your age, your race, your faith, your sexual orientation, is
Judge Inman, you froze up again.
so sorry. Hold
That's
on
okay.
a second.
You're back, I think.
I don't know if that's better.
No. I think Judge Inman is frozen in position for a few minutes. Justice Davis, could you pick up on that? What happens next?
Sure. So Judge Inman gave a very thorough explanation of how cases come up to the appellate courts, except for a small category of cases that you mentioned. They go through the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals issues a decision, and they sit in 3-judge panels, as you said. If the decision is unanimous, then the losing party can ask our court, the Supreme Court, to agree to hear the case, and we have the discretion to do so, and we have to decide whether it involves an issue of great significance to the law in North Carolina, and if so, we'll typically take it. If there's a dissent in the Court of Appeals, if it's a split 2-to-1 decision, then the losing party has an absolute right to take it to our court, and that happens from time to time in close cases. And then once we issue our ruling, if it's a question of state law, which it is maybe 85 to 90% of the time, that's it. The buck stops with us. But if it's one of the 10% or so cases in which we're ruling on federal law, the losing party has the right to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to hear the case, which happens once in a while. I mean, it may be once every 2 to 3 years. But other than that, our decisions are usually final.
Thank you very much. Judge Inman has turned off her video, and sometimes that helps, but she can still participate and hear, I hope.
I can hear you. I don't know
Great.
if you can hear me, but
Yes, we can.
thank you for your patience.
Like I said, this happens on every Zoom call I've been on. Chief Justice Beasley, what is the biggest challenge for our North Carolina judicial system?
Wow. Well, I mean, we're in a pandemic and we're greatly challenged now around how best to hear cases. We are often challenged around our funding. We are funded by the legislature, and the legislature determines what the budget is for the judicial branch of government. And we are underfunded. We are the 9th largest state in the nation, with roughly a population of 10 million, and we're probably about the 46th in funding in the nation.
Wow.
So we really ought to be somewhere else. The needs are very great. You know, in addition to running our courts, we have opportunities to hold specialty courts like drug treatment courts. We needed more before the pandemic. What we know as a result of the pandemic is that substance abuse and alcoholism are on the rise. We know as a result of the pandemic that domestic violence is on the rise, even though the filings are down, that the calls to the hotlines, the domestic violence hotlines, are up exponentially. So we need to be, as a court system, prepared to address that. We know that child abuse is up. The normal reporters like educators and physicians and social workers aren't having the same kind of contact with children. And so even though the filings are down, the courts need to be ready to be responsive. And so those are very difficult positions for families to be in, and certainly for courts to be prepared to be responsive. So we really do need funding. And we're looking forward to a host of other programs. We know we need to improve and increase our veterans courts. And with a population of roughly 10 million, we have about 1 million veterans in North Carolina. People who've served this nation and state well and have, you know, suffered some consequences because of their service, and they need veterans courts, and we need to treat them with respect and dignity and not criminalize their behavior. Those courts do require accountability, however, but we only have 4 of them. And with that many veterans, we really do need more. So the needs are great.
Thank you. I had no idea that funding depended on the legislature. I'd never even thought about it before.
Yes, ma'am.
But I know that they hold those purse strings mighty tight. Let me see if there's some questions here on the chat. I have to read through these. Just bear with me a second. Oh, I'll address this to Justice Davis. Can defendants in jail participate via video without coming to court?
You know, I could attempt to answer that question, but I'm going to pass the buck to my beloved Chief Justice because I think she can give you a more definitive answer than I could on that question.
Okay.
In most districts, they can. It's, because everybody's trying to take extra precautions because of COVID-19. Most counties are permitting and allowing accommodations for defendants who are incarcerated to attend hearings by what we call WebEx or virtual hearings.
Is that only during the pandemic, or can they do that at other times?
They were doing it before the pandemic in some instances, but certainly that number of districts has increased probably 3 or 4-fold because of the pandemic.
Okay. And I'll toss this out and let either Justice Davis or Chief Justice Beasley answer. About how many cases does the North Carolina Supreme Court hear in a normal year? A normal year, not this year.
Well, and we haven't been normal for a little while. Of course, we are in the midst of a pandemic, but for the last 3 years, the court has been commemorating its 200th anniversary. And so as a part of that commemoration, we have had permission by the legislature to travel across the state to actually hold court. So as far west as we were able to come was Henderson County. We held court in Henderson, Morganton, and Asheville. But we've traveled to about 20 counties in a 3-year period, which has been really wonderful. I mean, most people will not have the opportunity to actually physically come to the Supreme Court of North Carolina in Raleigh. And it's been great to be able to take our work and for everyday people to see us hear these cases. So while we've been traveling, we've really tried hard to hear roughly about 100, close to 100 cases a year. I'm sure we will fall a little short of that this year. But that's roughly, on a normal year, maybe 100, 120 cases a year.
Okay, thank you. I had no idea. Judge Inman says on the chat that plans were already underway for oral argument sessions to be live streamed, but the pandemic sped up the process. So that goes back to the other questions. That
is true, and she led the first panel of judges for the first arguments on the Court of Appeals. And I'm sorry she's not able to offer that because it's a wonderful story about how successfully run that panel was. After that, the Court of Appeals held its arguments, the Supreme Court held oral arguments virtually as well, and those were successful also. So we're thrilled that this is an option, and it is an option. It's wonderful that arguments going forward will be live streamed. So you don't have to worry about coming to the court in order to see our work and to be able to witness all of it. You can just log in. So I'm excited about that.
That answered one of our other questions that had popped up. Let's see.
And I'll just also say that in trial courts that are holding virtual arguments, you can also log into those hearings as well. You can't participate, but you can log in and you can witness those hearings.
Wow, it's like court TV.
It's like court TV.
Judge Inman, what aspect of your job do you find the most rewarding?
I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's good. That's almost like asking, who's my favorite family member? There are so many things that I love about my job. But what I love about my job at the Court of Appeals, and I loved as a trial judge, and I will love at the Supreme Court, is really a search for truth that goes back to my first career as a journalist. Really trying to consider issues from all sides and making sure that we are keeping an open mind and finding out where a very careful analysis of the facts and the law take us. I think Justice Davis, or maybe Chief Justice Beasley, had said to be cautious if you hear a judicial candidate who makes you a promise about how they will decide a case. And the reason that that's so dangerous is that in order to do that, that judge would be deciding ahead of time what the results should be, and then kind of working backward to rationalize how to get to that decision. What I love about this work is we look at the facts, we look at the law, we think about the fabric of the law that we have in the state. There's something called stare decisis, where we follow precedent, and we really think through what is just, what is fair, and that's more than a value moral decision. That's really a careful decision about what's consistent with the law and what's consistent with not only our statutes, but our state constitution. So I really love that analysis and that search for truth.
Thank you. You know, I don't mean to editorialize too much, but when our current president started making a lot of decisions that I considered bad decisions, my thought about that was that it was going to be the judicial system and journalists that got us out of the trouble we've been in. And I still feel that way. I think that that's what makes us a democracy. Anyway.
Thank you for that editorial comment.
Pardon?
Thank you for that editorial comment.
Well, I'm full of opinions. Oh, let's see. Chief Justice Beasley, can you tell us about the work of the court clerks?
The law clerks or the clerks of court?
I guess I don't know the difference, and I suspect a couple of people don't. So maybe tell us the difference in what they do.
So each of us as appellate judges have staff members who are law clerks. Generally speaking, they're all recent graduates of law schools. They are licensed attorneys, and they help us do research and think through the cases that are coming before the court. We have clerks of court in each of the 100 counties. There's also a clerk of the Supreme Court and a clerk of the Court of Appeals. And each of those is statutorily the keeper of the records. So every single court file is filed or kept under the auspices of the clerk of court. So Jackson County has a clerk of court, and Clay County has a clerk of court. Every single county has an elected clerk of court. And those terms are 4 years. They're elected every 4 years. And their rank is equivalent to a superior court judge.
Wow. Okay, thank you very much. There's another question. Can ex-felons vote in North Carolina? And I'll let any of you chime in on that.
Chief Justice, you probably know this off of the top of your head better than Justice Davis or I. I think there's not a yes or no to that.
There isn't, and they can under certain conditions. And I will just offer the generalization that if they've been placed on probation or parole, all of the conditions around probation and parole must be fulfilled, and they must be released from, I don't think it's called probation anymore, or parole, it's called post-supervision release. All of those conditions must be fulfilled, and they must be released from those programs before they can vote. They cannot vote if they are currently serving, even if they are not in jail. They may be gainfully employed, but if they are on probation or parole or post-supervision release, they cannot vote.
I have a follow-up to that. To make any changes in that, would that be up to the legislature or would that be up to the courts?
The legislature, unless someone challenged the law and filed a lawsuit, then the interpretation of the law would be up to the courts, but the actually making of the law is happens before the legislature.
I see. Thank you. Oh, Justice Davis, what can you tell us about the procedures by which the court decides a case? What are the procedures that the court goes through?
So once we agree to take a case, the parties are given a schedule to submit legal briefs or legal memoranda. And once all the memoranda, the briefs come in, we spend a lot of time, and our law clerks spend a lot of time going through them. We try really hard to master the record, the factual part of the case, what happened down below. And then we try to spend a lot of time researching the applicable law. So we're fully up to speed on the facts and the law by the time of the oral argument, which, as the chief said, is now being done currently by video, but they proceed the same way. Oral arguments in our court, as was mentioned earlier, we don't take evidence, so we don't hear witnesses, we don't take exhibits. Instead, we hear arguments from the parties' lawyers, and each side makes arguments. We ask them the questions that are on our mind based on our review of the written materials about things we're not clear on. And then once the oral arguments are finished, well, in the old days, we would retire to our conference room adjacent to the courtroom, and we would talk about the case and then finally cast our votes on who should win and who should lose. In the current pandemic, we're now doing that by WebEx as well, but it's the same idea. Everyone gets a chance to talk. Everyone gets to say how they see the case, and we talk about the various issues, and ultimately we vote. And at the end of that week's oral arguments, we pick our writing assignments in a prearranged order. So every case that was argued that week, we know which member of the court is going to write the opinion in that case. And once you've drawn a case, usually within maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, we will circulate a written opinion, a written decision to the other members of the court. And the other members of the court can either join our opinion or signify that they disagree with some aspect of our decision, and they write a dissenting opinion. And then ultimately, when the final majority opinion and the final dissenting opinion are written, then we release it to the public. And it's not at all unusual to have dissents. The issues that come before our court are not easy, or they wouldn't be at the Supreme Court. Of close cases that do reflect that based on the fact that there is a dissenting opinion. But that's our process. Excuse me, our process in a nutshell.
Thank you. Here's another question. Chief Justice Beasley, I think this one is probably for you. There's been some suggestion that the legislature would increase the number of justices on the North Carolina Supreme Court. Would you be allowed to address any questions about that?
I just don't know anything about it. I too have heard that it's a possibility, and I don't know anything more about that. I'm not sure if Justice Davis or Judge Inman knows.
Would you be able to state your opinion if you think it's a good idea or not a good idea, or is that crossing a boundary?
I don't know if it is or not. I don't know if it's crossing a boundary, but I'm not really comfortable saying one way or the other.
Okay. I'm seeing heads nod in agreement on that one, that not to discuss that any further. We've talked a little bit about how difficult it might be to campaign in the time of a pandemic. Do you have any other things that you can say? I really see the Democrat groups, and especially over here in the far West, I see us as ambassadors. We're ambassadors for people who are running for office. And so it's our duty and obligation to go out and spread the word as much as we can, and we will. We have a very active group here. Normally it's very active, but we will do all that we can. But are there any special challenges that have come up because of the pandemic in terms of your campaigning, Judge Inman?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right now, great. Perfect word for each of you, and we thank you so very, very much. When we can't even, and I'm turning off my video.
Yeah,
so
you're
maybe
freezing up again.
someone's hand. It's very to think about us. But the good thing about judicial candidates and kind of the silver lining about not being able to make promises is it comes down to trust. And anyone who trusts Susan Landis, who receives a phone call or an email or sees a social media post from Susan Landis or from Layla, I see here, or Judith, Nancy, any of you, they trust you already. And when you tell them that you trust Chief Justice Cherie Beasley, Justice Mark Davis, Judge Lucy Inman, that's probably enough information for them. Even though the legislature has made these races partisan, we all agree that partisan ideology should have nothing to do with the court's work. Mm-hmm. You can tell your friends and family, we have the most experience. We are the most qualified. And I know that Claire can probably put in the chat box each of our websites. You can send people a link to our websites and they can check out our qualifications themselves. But basically, if you trust us, your family and friends, regardless of their political affiliation, I think are more likely to trust us. And that is a priceless, priceless gift you make to each of us. We thank you so much for it.
We're happy to do it. And I think most of us recognize that we are very fortunate to have the North Carolina Supreme Court that we have. It's often in the newspaper. I read a lot of news, and North Carolina Supreme Court really stands out in the country as a model of what the court should be. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? We're about to wrap up everything.
I would just echo what Judge Inman said. And I mean, Susan, you mentioned that you're on Facebook, and
oh, yeah.
We cannot underestimate the power of social media. Each of us is on social media. I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And when you retweet our information, then your friends will do the same. And so we hope we won't be out for quite some time. And frankly, I'm not sure that we will be moving around in the way that we traditionally do before the election. I'm not sure we'll have the big gatherings. So in all the ways that you're willing to talk about our candidacy, it really does make a difference, and we really do appreciate it.
We will do all we can. We really will. There's a lot of us over here that do Facebook and have large email lists, and we will do all we can to make sure the three of you are on the Supreme Court.
Susan, I love the word you used, ambassador. I think that is just so perfect. I mean, if all of you could be ambassadors for our court, you know, so many North Carolinians don't even know that we elect judges. They think we're like the federal model, you know, which obviously appoints judges for life. So people don't even know that. Just by participating in this Zoom presentation tonight, I mean, all of you know more than 98% of the people in North Carolina. So please use this knowledge to educate others about the fact that yes, we elect our judges. Yes, the Supreme Court does a lot of really important things. This is why you should care. And this is why these three are the most qualified persons to serve on the court. You'd be amazed at how much information you now possess. And some of you already possess this information before tonight, but please use it to educate those around you. You'd be surprised how much influence you have. As Judge Inman and the Chief Justice just said, you know how many friends you have, you know how many people listen to you. So please advise them on this important issue. Be ambassadors.
We will. We're kind of outnumbered over here in the far west, so being an ambassador is about all we've got.
We'll take it.
Would any of the three of you like to have final words here?
Go ahead, Judge Inman.
Judge Inman?
Judge Inman?
I'm going to speak fast because I feel like the weather in here is going to completely take me off Zoom again.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you so very, very much. It's always an honor to be on any program with Chief Justice Beasley and Justice Davis. Susan, thank you so much for organizing this, and everybody for your time. We know that you're outnumbered in your counties, but it's not an all or nothing proposition for judicial candidates in any of your counties. Every vote counts. Every vote counts. And you helped each of us 6 years ago in 2014. You got every vote you could in your counties. And we appreciate that so much. I just wish we could be there in person to have you feel a little bit less outnumbered. But we thank you so very, very much.
Well, we're outnumbered, but we're tough. Mountains.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for making time to join with us. It's really an honor to have you, and I was really looking forward to this. Would Justice Davis, any last words?
No, I echo everything my colleagues have said. Y'all are wonderful. You got us through in 2014. Please pull us through again. We know the other side is going to be working hard too, but there's no one stronger than the North Carolina Democratic Women. Thank you.
That's true.
Sure.
Chief Justice Beasley, anything you'd like to say?
I too thank you for your time this evening, and I also thank you for your long-standing commitment to making sure that judges are elected. And I appreciate the fact that you never forget the judges. So please tell your friends, don't forget the judges. And thank you all so, so very much. I hope you all feel a sense of empowerment this year. I'm feeling good about the fact that we hope to do well, but I think that the entire Democratic slate will do well this year. And that will offer us all a lot of promise around making sure that judges are noticed on this ballot and that people pay attention to our races. So thank you all so much in all the ways that you help us and so many other really wonderful people hopeful to serve North Carolina.
Well, thank you very much. And we hope to see you at some point on the campaign trail. We'll see how it goes.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you all. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Yes, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.